we're going to take a little look at debugging and kind of just the state of debugging with Node.js. And to give you a little bit of context, I work on Google Chrome. I work on the Chrome DevTools. But I've been invested in DevTools and just generally tooling for a long time. I found this like recently. 10 years ago, I made this stunner right here. A nice little like cheat sheet of keyboard shortcuts for our best friend Firebug. So good. But like even then, I was just really excited to understand what kind of capabilities tools offered us. Because I was always like, I can learn one more thing, and I can be more productive, save my time, and save my stress. And we now have some good tools. We have one tool in particular that is our trusty friend. Good old console.log. We all use it. We love it. It's reliable. It's everywhere. You want to know what a value is? Hey, console.log's got your back. No problem. So that's great. But while it is useful, like console.log debugging, printf debugging, there are more powerful capabilities. So I wanted to touch on a few of those. A year ago at Google I/O, the Chrome team introduced some of the work that we'd done to introduce the V8 inspector component into Node, bringing some new debugging capabilities to the Node project. We actually announced a pull request rather than like something shipping, but hey, it landed, and now it's in there. So that's fine. I'm going to quickly walk through kind of just the basics of how this works. You have a little hello world script. You can run it like that, obviously. But you can run -- inspect. How many people have used -- inspect? Something good. Yes, great. OK. Do this, return on the debugger. Also, -- inspect will run it, turn on the debugger, and pause it on the very first statement of the script. I find this is really useful with utilities, other things where it's going to happen really fast, and you want to break at the very beginning to make sure any sort of breakpoints are in place. Now, when you run this, you'll get some output that looks like this. Hey, the debugger is on. It's listening to a WebSocket. And here's some docs. This is a little different than it was before. In previous Node versions, you saw something like this, a bit more text and a big, long URL that you felt compelled to copy paste, and it's kind of awkward. Anyways, don't do that anymore. It's a little bit better. And so this is kind of a good approach to take. So once you've turned things on, head over to Chrome, new tab, type in About Inspect. It'll bring you to a page that looks a little like this. And these are some inspectable targets. You'll see the Node script mentioned right here. But click on this guy right here, the dedicated DevTools for Node. And this is going to pop up DevTools that's just for your Node. Now, another approach to do the exact same thing is if Chrome's open and then a DevTools window's already open, and then you go and you take your script and you start inspecting it. In DevTools now, and this is new as of, it's shipped to Chrome Stable as of this week, right up in the top left corner, we'll add a nice, bright, green, shiny Node.js icon. Click that guy, and that'll bring up the dedicated window for you. So this is just the dedicated window. Obviously, it has less tabs than your typical Chrome DevTools because we're just dealing with Node and its capabilities. But the dedicated window is great because if you're working with your application, then you make some changes. So you're control-C'ing your application, and then you rerun it. This dedicated window is going to automatically reconnect to the node that is now there. So it's just there. It's just going to automatically reconnect whenever there's a new one. All right. So those are just kind of the basics. But I want to show a little bit of how this works in action. So we have a little web server app. And when I run it, internal server error, great. So we do have some problems. The console is telling me problems, great. Over in Chrome Inspect, I'm going to open this guy up. OK, so this is the app, 40 lines of stuff. Internal server error is right here. And so one thing that I know happens and it's a little, it's kind of confusing. So we're trying to do this. We catch. So we got some exception. And then at this point, we emit an error event. That actually gets heard up here when we're listening up on this guy. And then this arrow function is emitting its own error event, passing along the data. Now, I really want to know what this exception is right here, because I'm not getting it out on the console. But one thing that I can do is I'm going to place a breakpoint. Well, I don't actually want it here. I want to break inside of this arrow function. So I can place it this guy, but then turn on this column breakpoint right here. So now, all right, now we go over here, we reload, and I paused inside of the arrow function. And you can see data is inspectable. And so we're paused inside this guy. It's really cool. Works phenomenally well with arrow functions, with asynchronous code. It's super useful. Now, this guy comes down here where I say problem, and I'm losing the details about this exception somewhere between there. I don't know where exactly. I might start out with like a step in, see what happens, but I step in on emit. I'm inside of Node's core events module, which honestly, I don't want to walk through this. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to black box this guy. And with black boxing, it's just saying, hey, you probably, you're just going to avoid stepping through this. So we can see now in the call stack, it says that a few call frames are completely black boxed. And so now when I step in, we step directly to my own event handler for the exact same thing. So just bypassing all that. Right. Well, we got that under control. And E is telling us, well, this string, we still don't have our exception. I'll open up the console, just be like, this arguments. Yep, there it is. OK, there are two arguments. Right. OK, that string and then the actual exception. So I was just being silly. So what we can do, just take this guy, Control D for multiple selection, comma, spread. Good. And I'm going to hit Control S. Control S is a live edit. It's kind of like a hot module reload, but at the V8 level. And so now when I refresh the same guy, well, I'm still paused. I'm still paused. Hey. Now when I refresh, yeah, there we go. OK. So I was just getting the logs before, and now, yes, the actual exception made its way through. Nice thing here is I didn't have to restart Node. The live edit meant that I'm able to just keep that running, make some changes, and then see what happens. All right, so thank you. So showed just a few things here, column breakpoints, black boxing, live edit, all this good stuff that's been available when you're debugging Chrome, now all available when you're debugging with Node as well. All right, bring it back to these guys. So if you've done this before and you feel like it takes a little bit of work just to bring up that window, there are some tools that help with this to make it like a one action thing. Hey, I want to debug window. There's a Chrome extension called NIM, a project called Spec Process, another one called Rocket. Just makes it kind of a single action to get that up and running. Really what they're doing is opening this URL. We just need the DevTools URL with the WebSocket kind of hooked into it. But because it's a kind of a fancy URL, you can't open it in normal ways. So that's it. It's just kind of the under the covers. All right. I want to briefly touch on 4 kind of other approaches apart from those basics. One situation you might find yourself in is you ran Node normally, no flags, no anything, but you've reached a state and you're now like, I really want to debug it. Profile, I don't know. You want to start inspecting it. Is it too late? It's not too late. No, you can do it. Process, debug process, and pass it just a process ID as a number. You can run this in a completely different node process, and it'll just flip on debugging in your target. Really cool. That works. If you want to do debugging and you're more of a terminal kind of person and you want like a GDB style interface, you can use the existing CLI debugger. This has been in Node for quite some time, but the back end was recently redone to be sitting on the new implementation. But you just work with the script here on the command line with some short commands. It's pretty great. Now, another approach is via the DevTools Protocol. Now, as you saw, there's this WebSocket port, and that just speaks JSON RPC with the DevTools Protocol. This right here, what we're looking at, is a script that attaches to Chrome or Chrome headless and just captures a JavaScript profile just automatically. If we wanted to take this script and have it run against Node instead, we just change the port to connect to Node's debugging port. Otherwise, the rest of it works. The entire DevTools protocol that Chrome uses is obviously bigger than the set of what Node is using, but there's some great overlap around profiling, debugging, console, and the runtime, all this. So you can do this here over the WebSocket. Another approach is to use the new core inspector module that was added, I think is new in 8. And here you just set up a session and you talk the exact same protocol, profiler, enable, start, stop, same thing as we were doing in the last one. But this is happening inside of your Node process instead. Also a decent option. With debugging out of the way, I wanted to quickly touch on tracing. Because there's some cool stuff. Now, tracing is a very powerful collection of tools. On the Chrome team, we use this to understand what is happening in the browser. This is 2 seconds of loading a page on Wikipedia. And on Chrome, we use this to understand what is happening. And anything that's taking time, we go to a trace. That is the ground truth. And so much stuff is instrumented there. And this is like the most basic looking thing. It can get a lot more involved, but we're going to skip over that. Traces are really, really powerful. And the great thing is now this whole capability is available in Node. It is still early days, but this is how you can do it. Run with trace events enabled. And after you run this, it's going to spit out a JSON file of the trace. And you can open that up in Chrome in about:tracing. Just drag it in, and you'll see something like this. This is one that I captured with Node just the other day. So there's a few things going on here, and it gets really interesting in this area in the middle. I'm not going to zoom in and explore it too much, but I've selected this whole region. And down at the bottom, we see some of the results. We have that we know how much time V8 spent executing, compiling, parsing, doing GC work, total time, self-time, and the on-CPU time. So some nice breakdown around the timings of what's happening on that thread. And then above it is some really fascinating stuff. And this is actually showing me here kind of a breakdown of where my latencies are between DNS and TCP connection and the rest of the network request. Really helps, in this case, identify where the certain latencies are. I will point out that this aspect is sitting on top of the new async wrap implementation in Node Core. And this part isn't yet landed in Node. There's a good-looking pull request, really good stuff that, when landed, will enable this. Still, the kind of detail in here in the trace, there's a lot more opportunity. So I'm really excited to see continued investment in instrumentation and understanding all sorts of things and what's happening inside Node, like understanding when the event loop is doing work or whatever. This is a great solution to instrumenting all that and building tools around it. Yes, good. A basic trace looks like that, but there are some off-by-default categories which give you more detail at the cost of a little overhead. This would be the magical incantation that turns on all those categories. Yeah, there you go. So that's about going to wrap it up for me. One last thought I want to leave you with is just explore and think what is beyond the console log. Thank you guys very much.